Orphan poor folks, head on home, ho.
At those words, I stood up. So did Alice, as I looked at her.
Seems like this was a waste of time.
I heard her mutter softly. It appears I wasn't the only one who caught that. I saw Kevin slightly shrug his shoulders. While internally smirking, I was about to leave, but then I stopped and turned back. I'm closing my account, you know. At that, George looked baffled, going, huh? Without responding to him, I decided to leave with Alice. Once outside, I immediately called my secretary. Have you got the time now? Actually, I want to close my current bank account and switch to a different bank. I started the process of account closure right away.
Wait a minute.
Just as I was about to get in the car, thinking all was done, George came running over in a panic. I stopped and turned around.
What on earth did you do?
Before me, Alice spoke up. I'm Mike, 41 years old bachelor running a few restaurants. I've always disliked lounging in the executive office, preferring to stand in the shop between work. It all started with the cafe my parents left me. Small as it was a cafe beloved by many regulars.
How can I make coffee like you used to, Dad?
Well, you've got the basics down. Now you just need that practice makes perfect.
I loved the coffee my dad made, always heading straight to the cafe after school. By the time I was in high school, I was working there as a part-timer. I learned daily about brewing coffee and making snacks. Those days felt genuinely happy. But that all came to an abrupt end in my third year of high school.
What? Why did this happen to Mom and Dad?
Leaving the shop to me and the employees, my parents went out to buy supplies. They had just informed me they managed to buy the coffee beans they wanted. Their car was hit by a drunk driver, losing control and crashing. Trapped between a utility pole and the colliding vehicle, my parents were gone.
Mike, where are Mom and Dad?
They've gone to a faraway place.
Alice, only 5 at the time, couldn't grasp what happened to our parents. At a loss for words, all I could do was hold her. From there, my life took a drastic turn. Our parents were only children themselves, with no other relatives to turn to, and the grandparents who took us in were already up in years.
Alice, I'll protect you.
Therefore, I gave up going to college to raise Alice. Fortunately, people around me sympathized and helped me out. My grandfather took over the cafe management until I became an adult, keeping the shop for us. The regulars who taught me how to manage it. The college students who tutored me between shifts at the cafe. And the ladies who looked after Alice. With their help, I managed to keep both the precious shop and Alice.
Mike, you've got talent, so give it a try.
Then I got to manage the stores of those men, who were regulars of my shop, and before I knew it, I had become the owner of several eateries. Thanks to this, I could afford to send Alice to college, which I'm truly grateful for. And remembering that gratitude, I worked hard every day.
Oh, Mike's at the shop today?
Yes, so I'll brew you an exceptional cup of coffee. One day, I responded with a smile to a regular who noticed and spoke to me while I prepared coffee.
By the way, how's your sister doing?
Currently, I've entrusted one of the shops to Alice. She's well acquainted with it from hanging around there since she was young and has smoothly managed it after studying business in college. When I shared this, he asked, "Does she have someone special?" Indeed, Alice has no boyfriend, let alone any male company. She's kind and beautiful like our mother, and while she's not without admirers, she once said she was too happy with her work to care. Nevertheless, I wish for Alice's happiness too.
Actually, I know a guy her age.
He's a competent banker, but due to his quiet nature, he's single. Alice prefers quiet over loud people, so it seemed like a good match. Therefore, I contacted Alice during my break. Well, it's a good opportunity, so I'd like to meet him, she replied, so I agreed to arrange a meeting. The regular was pleased when I told him.
But I should mention something.
He then started to speak seriously. It seems the guy's parents are somewhat problematic. His father is the head of a bank, known for being quite stubborn. His mother, too, enjoys looking down on others from behind his shadow. You should have told me sooner. Hearing this, I began to wonder if I should call it off, which must have shown on my face.
Well, it's just a rumor. Don't worry about it.
He said this with a laugh, but it's hard not to be concerned. I might as well check it out. Muttering to myself, I decided to ask a detective friend to investigate. I then informed Alice about the rumor. I see. Well, I'll meet them and see what they are like, she decided. So we're going ahead with the meeting. It's about time. Alice is considering marriage. I murmured, reminiscing about the past. Alice clung to me a lot as a child, perhaps because of our parents' absence. She had hardly any rebellious phase, always wanting to help with my work, growing up to be a caring sister. I guess I'm getting old. Reflecting on this made me feel somewhat warm inside, pondering the swiftly passing years alone.
Hi, how are you, Mike?
Hi, fine. How are you, Sarah? When I showed up at the cafe today, I was greeted by the shop manager, Sarah. I have immense trust in Sarah, who has been working here since the old days.
I heard about it. Alice has a matchmaking meeting coming up, right?
Sarah asked with a curious look. I just chuckled and nodded in response. Yeah, that's right.
Alice is finally getting married. I guess I'm getting old too.
She mused, to which I replied, she's not married yet, and shared that I had been thinking the same thing yesterday. That made her giggle.
We really are alike, aren't we?
Speaking of which, do you have someone special, Sarah?
Not at all. My love is this cafe.
Like me, she's single and without a partner. Though not much different in age from me, her youthful appearance could attract many.
I wonder what Alice's partner is like. Tell me more about him later.
Sarah and Alice are close like sisters, sharing similar interests, and often going out together on holidays. About that, it seems her parents might be a bit troublesome. I mentioned sharing the rumors. Sarah looked concerned.
Is everything going to be okay?
For now, I've asked someone to look into it.
You always act fast.
As we were talking, the cafe door opened. As I glanced while greeting, there stood a guy in his 20s. I thought he was a new customer, but something about him was familiar, so I observed him discreetly.
Excuse me for interrupting. Have you been working here for a long time?
Yes, quite a while.
Did you used to feed a school-age child here?
Puzzled internally, I nodded, remembering the cafe's long history of welcoming children. The man said, I thought so, and looked at me.
I was taken care of here in the past.
I looked at him intently, recalling a schoolboy from many years ago who resembled him. Could you be Kevin?
Yes, that's me. Thank you for back then.
He replied with a slight smile. After having his coffee without much conversation, Kevin soon left.
I think I've seen that guy at the bank before.
Sarah remarked. Banker, and about the same age as Alice. I thought, realizing the connection to Alice's potential match. Could it be?
What's wrong?
Oh, nothing. I shook my head, deciding it was time to focus on work. Better to leave the thinking for later. All right, back to work. I'm counting on you, boss.
Hey, don't tease me.
Then we both resumed our work with a smile. A few days later, the day of the matchmaking meeting finally arrived. I can't believe the venue is here.
It must be a coincidence, but it feels like fate.
The venue was a well-known restaurant I frequented. Next to me, Alice was sporting a similar expression. We were shown into the room, and after a while, the other party came over saying, "Sorry for the wait." The first to enter was Kevin. Seeing him, I thought, so it was him. He greeted us with a nod. Next to him, a man looking like his father scrutinized me, making me feel uneasy. Then the meeting began.
This is my father, George.
The man introduced by Kevin was probably the infamous stubborn dad. The stern-looking man next to him.
Pardon me, but you seem young to be a father.
He suddenly remarked, "No, I'm Mike, her brother. Pleased to meet you today." I replied with a polite nod, while thinking that I intended to greet properly without even needing to be asked. Our parents passed away when my sister was young.
What? An orphan?
George exclaimed, surprised by my words. I closed my mouth, taken aback.
A pauper without parents is no match for my son.
No, we're not poor. It's just that.
So think a penniless orphan would match with our family of bankers.
I tried to counter, but he wouldn't listen, exemplifying his reputation as a stubborn father.
Dad, stop it.
Keep quiet.
Kevin tried to intervene, but was ignored. Glancing at his mother, she too had a disdainful look, silently judging us. I didn't want Alice to be part of such a family. As I turned to Alice, she was intently staring at them. Just as I was about to ask her what's wrong, the final straw came.
Orphan poor folks should just go home.
At that, I stood up, and Alice did the same.
It seems like a waste of time, then.
And I could hear the slight tremble in her voice. Sharing our sentiment, Kevin slightly shrugged his shoulders. I was about to leave but stopped and turned back. I'll be closing my account, then. At this, George was bewildered, uttering "huh." Without further response, I decided to leave with Alice. Outside, I immediately called my secretary. "Have you got the time now? Actually, I want to close my current bank account and switch to a different bank." I immediately started the process of closing the account. After finishing the call with my secretary, I turned around to see Kevin talking to Alice. Noticing my gaze, he showed his expression apologetically.
Are you done talking? All right, let's head home, Mike.
Suggested with a smile. We started walking.
Hold on a moment.
Just as I was about to get into the car, thinking all was settled, George rushed over in a panic. I paused and turned back.
What have you done?
George, shouting like that. It seems like they moved quickly. Given the speed, it must have been others who acted while talking. I felt a sense of pride in my team's efficiency.
I got a call that an $800 million account was closed. Who exactly are you?
Before I could answer, Alice spoke up.
You don't know, he's a successful entrepreneur who manages several restaurants.
While I thought calling me successful was a bit much, I looked at George's face. He was staring at me in disbelief.
It's true, so it got closed, right? Let's go back now.
Pulling my arm towards the car, George's expression changed dramatically.
I apologize. Please reconsider. If the account stays closed, Our bank will.
Ignoring his plea, we quickly got into the car and left. We went home first, changed, and then headed to the cafe.
Oh, what brings you two here today?
Sarah probably didn't expect us to come today. She seemed surprised to see us. We ordered coffee from her and took a moment to relax. Shortly after, Kevin arrived, saying sorry for being late. He stepped close to us, apologizing profoundly. "I'm sorry for my father's behavior." Alice looked at him with a mix of disbelief and annoyance.
That was really rude. How long will you let your father have his way? You need to stand up for yourself.
When Alice spoke, Kevin apologized again. It turns out Alice and Kevin went to the same elementary school. Kevin could come to this cafe back then because Alice brought him here.
I'm sorry for causing trouble, both in my school days and now.
His parents had remarried, and that woman wasn't his biological mother. George was always focused on work, neglecting his family. Kevin's real mother had left him with his father and moved out. Because he never paid attention to his family, Kevin couldn't even have proper meals. That's why Alice, feeling sorry for him, brought him along.
After that, we moved, and I couldn't even say thank you. And now I've troubled you again.
Apologizing repeatedly and sharing his story, he had finally confronted his father, declaring an end to their relationship.
You did well.
Despite saying so, Alice had a worried look on her face. To which he replied, "Don't worry.
I'll become a man you can be proud of this time for sure."
A few days later, I visited the restaurant again. I wanted to apologize for the inconvenience caused that day. "I'm really sorry, especially since you prepared the meal."
Don't worry about it.
While we were talking,
Oh,
George suddenly appeared. Why was he here? Seeing my puzzled look, he made an awkward face.
why are you here?
"This is one of my restaurants." I heard him mutter, so I replied, and he made a face like he'd bitten into a sour apple. After a moment of silence, he suddenly apologized. "I'm sorry for the other day." I was taken aback by his sudden apology. Seeing his remorseful appearance, the intimidating air he had that day was gone. "Would you like to talk for a bit?" Curious about his change, we moved to a private room to talk.
After that incident, I was dismissed as the president.
It seems the bank was in chaos over the $800 million closure, and he was fired as a consequence. To be honest, I knew about this. His dismissal was part of the conditions to stop the account closure.
After being fired, no one was waiting for me at home.
Neither Kevin nor his wife were there. Apparently, she was only interested in his title as president, leaving a note and divorce papers saying, "I have no use for you now that you're no longer president." He had time to reflect on his actions, realizing he had done nothing for his family. And that's why no one helped him when he was in trouble. Indeed, your current situation is the result of your own actions. If you had listened to Kevin when he was younger, things might have been different. If he had paid attention to Kevin's words and helped him, maybe Kevin would have been willing to help his father now. Kevin became reserved because George, his father, always dismissed his words, leading him to believe tacking was futile. You still have time. Please think things over carefully. With that, he looked down, lost in thought, and I left the private room. George might not be a bad person at heart. Investigations revealed he was a diligent individual. His reluctance to marry his son to a poor person was likely out of a desire to prevent Kevin from struggling. But his actions were misguided and needed to be addressed.
So what happened to the president?
He's not yet 60 and is trying to find work. I shared as we talked in a nearby diner, not the usual cafe. In front of us were several children. I managed several eateries and had bought a failing diner to run a children's meal service. And today's my once-a-week day to cook up and serve stew. Sarah was helping out.
Wasn't it Kevin who inspired you to start this children's diner?
Yeah, you remember well, don't you? Indeed, Kevin was the catalyst for starting this children's diner. When I lost my parents, the support from those around me meant I never struggled for a meal. That's partly why I was shocked, seeing him suffer from hunger right in front of me. Realizing some kids don't get enough to eat. That was when I realized how fortunate I was. Kevin and the kids here might have different circumstances, but seeing him hungry made me want to feed him, leading me to start the diner. The fact that children Alice's age were suffering so much shocked me. About George, I've called him to help out this time.
Could it be?
Sarah's gaze followed to George, surrounded and puzzled by the children. He probably never really parented before. Unsure how to interact with them. He forced sacrifices on Kevin before. First, I wanted him to see the reality of kids who can barely eat. George had lived as a banker, reaching the position of bank president, but that narrowed his perspective. I invited him for unpaid help to learn.
That's so like you, Mike.
Which I pretended not to hear, stirring the stew. This stew, taught by my mother, is popular with the kids.
Hey, Mike, I've come to help.
Announced Alice as the stew was ready. She was followed by Kevin, both surprised to see George surrounded by children. All right, the stew's ready, let's serve it. Sarah and Alice nodded, smiling. Even Kevin and George, still bewildered, began to help. Seeing them, I smiled too. Afterwards, my world changed significantly. Seeing the children full and happy seemed to make George reflect. Deciding he could live on his savings alone, he began volunteering actively. What I needed was to be more considerate of others, he said. Yet, he tried to stay away from Kevin, his biggest victim, considering it his way of making amends.
People around think I don't have a girlfriend because I'm quiet, but I've never stopped thinking about you.
Kevin confessed to Alice, saying so. Alice accepted, and now they're dating. Maybe it's time for me to move forward. Alice has grown independent from me. I mused, watching Sarah work happily. Years later, I decided to step back from active business management, leaving it to trustworthy subordinates. Planning to live more leisurely. If you'd like, would you join me?
Yes, I'd love to.
I realized I wanted to spend my life with Sarah, so I invited her. Right now, we're living together in the countryside.
You and Sarah should get married?
Marriage isn't everything. Alice, who married Kevin and had adorable kids, looked at me incredulously, but I ain't about to rush into marriage. But still, Sarah remains someone special, and I plan to live for us both from now on.